Who the hell are you, and why are you cooking in my kitchen? That's what flew out of my mouth when I came home 3 days early to find a stranger in my cabin. Pots, boiling clothes in my bedroom, like she'd lived there for weeks. Then she says Barbara from the HOA said, "It's okay." Quick question, where are you watching from? Drop it below and imagine this happening to you. Rage doesn't even cover it. What would you do if someone said that stick around because what happened next? Pure chaos. As a security installer, I noticed the smallest signs of intrusion, and today something felt wrong. The afternoon sun was blazing, yet my porch light glared like a beacon. I never leave that on, ever. A tiny detail, but it screamed inconsistency. My gut tightened as I slid the key into the lock. The knob turned smoothly, too smoothly, for a door that should have been locked for days. I pushed it open and froze. A wave of garlic and simmering tomatoes rolled out like a welcome I never wanted. Someone was cooking in my house, not just cooking moving in. I stepped inside and closed the door quietly behind me. Every instinct in me was screaming to check the corners, clear the rooms, like I was back in training. Instead, I moved slow, scanning. A purse on the table, lipstick-stained mug shoes by the door. My house screamed someone else's life. My couch had an unfamiliar throw draped over it. A drying rack stood in the living room, women's clothes swaying gently from the ceiling fan's breeze. And then the humming hit me. Soft, cheerful, like someone having the best day ever. My pulse thudded in my ears. For a second I wondered, did I walk into the wrong house? But the family photo on the wall said otherwise. I rounded the corner to the kitchen, and there she was. A woman in her 50s, short brown hair, floral apron, tied neat like she owned the place. She froze when she saw me wooden spoon clattering onto the tile. Her face drained of color so fast it was like watching a candle blow out. "Oh my God," she whispered, backing into the counter. You're not supposed to be here." I stared at her, forcing my voice steady. "Excuse me," I said, each word sharp. "What exactly are you doing in my house?" Her hands trembled, gripping the counter like it might save her from drowning. For a moment, silence stretched between us like a live wire ready to snap. Finally, words tumbled out of her mouth, quick and desperate. "Barbara said you'd be gone for 2 weeks. She told me it was safer for me to stay here instead of where I was before." Barbara. The HOA. President. That name dropped into my gut like a stone. I glanced at the security panel on the wall, and my stomach flipped. The dark control panel hit me harder than her words. Someone had killed the system on purpose. Not disarmed, powered down. I install these systems for a living. They don't just shut off. Someone with knowledge had gutted my home's first line of defense. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. "Barbara let you in?" I asked slowly, my voice low now, dangerous in its calm. She nodded quickly, relief flickering like maybe this explanation would make it all okay. "Yes, she has a key. She said it was part of a community safety program. She even told me how to turn off the alarm." My fists curled at my sides. Barbara didn't just have a key, she had my codes. My brain fired through every install I'd ever done, every client I'd warned about giving out access. And here I was, the idiot who trusted a lock in a neighborhood that worshipped HOA rules. I swallowed the taste of copper on my tongue. "Pack your stuff," I said, voice flat. "You're leaving. Now." Her breath hitched. Instead of moving, she grabbed her phone with shaking fingers. "Barbara, he's back. Grant came home early. He's telling me I have to leave." Even across the kitchen I heard Barbara's voice explode from the speaker, sharp, furious, the kind that could peel paint off walls. Her voice on the phone was rage and my blood boiled. Chloe, because she finally told me her name in the middle of that panic, looked at me with wide, pleading eyes. "She's coming over. She said don't let you force me out until she gets here." My laugh came out hollow, bitter. "Force you out? This is my house. You've got 5 minutes." While she hovered near the stove, wringing her hands, I walked the perimeter of my own home like a stranger cataloging a crime scene. Drawers cracked open, my spare blanket balled on the couch, toothbrush in my bathroom that wasn't mine. Every detail was a violation, personal and raw. Chloe kept mumbling apologies behind me, a broken record of, "I thought it was okay," and Barbara said it was fine, but I wasn't hearing her anymore. My mind was spiraling, mapping out every scenario, every legal breach, every ounce of leverage Barbara thought she had. This wasn't random. This was planned. My eyes landed on the drying rack again. her clothes swaying in the air like flags marking conquered territory. This wasn't a 2-day emergency. This was a setup for weeks. A plan Barbara executed with precision, watching my schedule, timing my departure, killing my security like flipping a light switch. My chest burned a mix of fury and something colder, violation. And beneath that resolve, hardening like steel. Barbara wanted a war. She just drafted the wrong guy. A car door slammed outside, crisp and final, snapping me out of my thoughts. Then came the sound of heels, sharp staccato clicks on my walkway. Fast, purposeful. Barbara was here. Through the window I caught a flash of navy blue and perfectly sprayed gray hair glinting under the porch light she probably left on. My jaw locked as I heard the front steps groan under her weight. The rhythm of those steps carried a message: authority, arrogance, control. My pulse slowed, that cold focus settling in like armor. I moved back to the kitchen, standing square, as the door burst open without so much as a knock. Barbara didn't enter the room. She invaded it. Her presence filled every corner like smoke, and for a second even Chloe shrank back, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Barbara's eyes zeroed in on me, sharp and calculating, like a hawk spotting prey. In that split second, I understood something deep in my bones. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a power play. And Barbara, she thought she'd already won. I glanced at Chloe, still frozen apron, splattered with sauce like some twisted badge of guilt, then back to Barbara, who was already opening her mouth to fire the first shot. And in that heartbeat, standing in my own kitchen that didn't feel like mine anymore, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever game she thought she was running, it ended tonight. Because if Barbara believed she could turn my home into her personal rental empire, she was about to learn the hard way. She picked the wrong house and the wrong guy. The door didn't just open, it exploded inward like my house owed her something. Barbara stormed in sharp suit and sharper attitude heels, striking the hardwood like gavel blows. Her eyes swept over me, as if I were the intruder, here, not her. Chloe pressed herself against the wall, shrinking her breath, fluttering like trapped paper in a draft. Grant, Barbara said, voice cold as a steel blade. You returned early without notifying the HOA. She didn't even pause for hello. My jaw tightened. Excuse me, this is my house. I don't need to notify anyone when I come home. My words landed like stones, but Barbara didn't flinch. She slid a paper from her folder and waved it in the air. She waved a clause from the handbook like a weapon, rules twisted into chains. Section 12.3, homeowners absent more than 7 days must notify HOA for security purposes. Her tone dripped with smug certainty, like this obscure line made her queen of my property. I stared at the tiny text swimming on the page. Barbara, I said slowly, I bought this place. I didn't sign away my rights. Her smile was a knife. Community living requires cooperation. You left this property vulnerable. I ensured it was safe. She flicked her eyes toward Chloe like she was a trophy of Barbara's benevolence. Safe. I stepped closer, heat building under my skin. By moving someone into my home without asking me, Barbara's chin lifted higher. Chloe needed housing. We have a duty to help residents in crisis. She's not a resident, I shot back. And duty doesn't mean breaking into my house. The air between us tightened, like a rope pulled to its last fiber. For a moment, all I could hear was Chloe's shallow breathing and the hum of my refrigerator, the only calm thing left in the room. How did you get in? I demanded. Barbara's gaze didn't flicker. The HOA maintains access for emergencies. My fists clenched. Access to my locks. My security system. Standard procedure, she said, crisp as if reciting a pledge. Emergency entry ensures property safety. My pulse slammed in my ears. You killed my alarm, I said. Her lips curved. We have master access. It's for your protection. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about safety. It was control, pure and simple. She thought owning a title gave her dominion over everyone's lives. You crossed the line, I said, flatly. Barbara stepped closer, her perfume slicing through the garlic haze Chloe left behind. What I did was necessary, she hissed. Chloe would have been homeless tonight. She's not my responsibility, I said, voice low. And this isn't charity, it's trespassing. Barbara's eyes glinted like broken glass. You're overreacting. It was temporary. Temporary. My laugh scraped like sandpaper. Barbara, you bypassed my security, gave away my home, and now you're standing here telling me I'm overreacting. Her tone shifted from fake calm to poison. Grant, this attitude doesn't serve you. Residents who fight the HOA often find life difficult. She let the word hang like smoke. My spine stiffened. Is that a threat? It's reality, she said smoothly. You want harmony? Play by the rules. Rules. Her rules. Not law, not decency, just her empire carved out of technicalities. I could almost see the chessboard in her mind. Every homeowner a pawn she could shove around at will. But I wasn't a pawn. Not now, not ever. Barbara, I said, voice steady as a trigger pull, get out of my house. Her face iced over, but her body didn't move. For 3 long seconds we stood there, a silent war, locked in 4 feet of space. Then she turned to Chloe. Pack your things, she ordered, venom sugar-coated with pity. Chloe scurried past me, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Her eyes met mine, full of apology, fear, maybe shame. Barbara lingered in the doorway, her silhouette etched against the late sun, bleeding through the glass. She leaned in, voice icy, fight me and you'll regret it. Then she left. The door slammed hard enough to rattle my frames and silence crashed over the house like a wave. I stood there staring at the empty doorway, my pulse refusing to slow. Outside, Barbara's heels hammered down the walkway, sharp echoes of defiance, and then her car door slammed like a final insult. The engine roared tires spitting gravel as she vanished down the road, but her threat hung in the air thick and heavy, a storm cloud that refused to move. I turned toward the kitchen. Chloe's half-cooked spaghetti still steamed on my stove, the sauce thickening into blood-red sludge. A cheap apron dangled from the chair like a discarded flag of surrender. My sanctuary. The place I built for quiet felt poisoned, violated by hands that didn't belong here. I grabbed the edge of the counter until my knuckles went white, forcing the heat inside me to harden into something sharper than rage resolve. Barbara thought she could walk into my life like a monarch enforcing her will. She thought fear would keep me compliant. She had no idea what kind of man she was dealing with. I've spent 2 decades learning how to secure homes, spot weaknesses, close gaps, and she just showed me hers. By the time I sat down at the kitchen table, the fight inside me wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity. I opened my laptop, fingers poised over the keys, and started drafting an evidence log. Timestamps, security logs, Chloe's admission about Barbara, every detail etched like bullets on a list. Because if Barbara wanted a war, she'd just declared it, and I don't lose wars. The night deepened, outside wind rattling the trees like distant applause. I stared out my window, saw the reflection of my own eyes, harder now, colder. She wanted control. She wanted obedience. What she was going to get was the truth dragged into daylight screaming. And this was only the beginning. I woke up the next morning to the sound of tape ripping. At first I thought it was some bird clawing at my screen door. But no. When I opened the front door, an envelope screamed at me in bold red, official HOA. Violation notice. Grass height violation, it claimed. Apparently my lawn had surpassed the sacred standard of 2.5 inches. I laughed out loud. 2.5 inches? Really? I ran a mental check last mow was 4 days ago, and I could swear it was tight enough to impress a golf course superintendent. But whatever. I peeled it off and tossed it onto the counter, brushing it off like a mosquito bite. Turns out, that was just the opening jab. The next mornings were a parade of red-stamped notices, grass too tall, cameras unauthorized, and my truck suddenly a menace to community harmony. The hypocrisy burned. The same cameras Barbara hacked were now illegal. She didn't even bother to make the lies creative. Each envelope dripped with that HOA, tone of authority, like scripture carved into stone tablets. And the fines, they stacked like poker chips, 150 for grass, 300 for cameras, 200 for improper vehicle alignment. I documented everything, rulers, timestamps, proof stacked high. If Barbara thought intimidation would make me fold, she clearly didn't know who she was dealing with. By day 3, the passive-aggressive theater turned into an outright siege. Her final shot landed Friday: mandatory disciplinary hearing. Failure to pay $650 in fines will result in legal action and possible residency suspension. Translation: she wanted me out. The phrasing dripped with arrogance. Failure to comply may result in loss of community privileges. Community privileges. This was my property, my house, my rights, and Barbara was dangling them like bait on a hook. For a solid minute, I stared at the letter not out of fear, but with the cold clarity you get before a storm. Instead of folding, I started building my case. First move, paper trail. I sat at my desk lit by the harsh glow of my laptop screen and wrote formal responses to every violation. Each rebuttal was surgical photos, measurements, documented timestamps, every lie dissected and pinned like a specimen under glass. Then I stapled them to a formal complaint. Unauthorized entry, unauthorized disablement of security system, unlawful occupancy of private property, retaliatory, enforcement of fabricated violations. I didn't stop there. I CC'd every board member, every email squeaky clean and dripping with legal undertones. If Barbara wanted a fight, she just walked onto my battlefield, and I wasn't playing fair. While the printer hummed, I cracked open the HOA bylaws. I read them word for word like a soldier memorizing enemy codes. Turns out those emergency access privileges Barbara bragged about, total fiction. The rules gave the HOA power over landscaping in common areas, snow removal schedules, and parking regulations on shared streets. Nowhere did it mention authority to enter a private residence without consent. And as for disabling a homeowner's security system, that wasn't just an overreach. It bordered on criminal trespass. With every paragraph, my anger sharpened into purpose. Barbara wasn't enforcing rules. She was building her own kingdom on everyone else's property lines. Saturday morning, I became a courier of truth. I hand-delivered sealed packets to every board member, each envelope heavy with evidence. Derek, the vice president, opened his door in a faded Broncos t-shirt, confusion clouding his eyes. "Morning," I said, calm as glass. "This is something you're going to want to read." He flipped through the first page, his brow furrowing like storm clouds gathering. "Grant? What is this evidence?" I said simply. "Proof that Barbara's been breaking laws while pretending to enforce them." His head snapped up, eyes wide. "What do you mean, breaking laws?" "Start with page 3, I told him. "It gets better." By the time I reached Robert, the treasurer, my pulse had settled into something close to satisfaction. The look on his face as he skimmed the summary priceless. "Unauthorized rentals," he muttered under his breath. "You're saying she's letting people stay in homes without permission?" "Not saying," I replied. "Proving. With dates, names, and payment trails." He blinked at me like a man watching his entire foundation crack. This needs to go to the board." "Exactly why I'm here," I said. "Call an emergency meeting. And Robert, check the books. If she's been pocketing cash, you'll see gaps big enough to drive a truck through." I was almost back at my driveway when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered, voice steady. "Hello?" Silence, then a hiss. "You're making a very big mistake. Some fights aren't worth picking. Drop this now while you still can." The words slithered through the line like oil slick and cold. I didn't need a caller ID to know who it was. I smiled, not because I found it funny, but because threats are tells. Barbara was nervous, and that meant leverage. I saved the voicemail, exported it, and dropped it straight into my growing evidence file. If she wanted war, I'd give her a war with timestamps and signatures. That night, my kitchen table turned into a war room. Documents fanned out like maps, coffee steaming beside a recorder looping Barbara's veiled threat. Every instinct told me this wasn't just about me anymore. If Barbara had the audacity to waltz into my house, disable my security, and move someone in, like it was a Motel 6, how many others had she violated? How many residents just paid the fake fines because fighting felt impossible? I pictured them, good people bullied into submission by a woman hiding behind HOA letterhead. No, not on my watch. I wasn't just defending my property now. I was tearing down her little empire brick by brick. I drafted one more letter that night, not to Barbara, but to the entire board. Request for emergency meeting to address abuse of authority. Potential financial misconduct and systemic harassment of residents by HOA leadership. Polite, professional, loaded like a chambered round. Then I hit print and leaned back, muscles tight, heart pounding with that raw edge of adrenaline you only feel when you know the fight's about to hit daylight. Barbara thought she could bury me under fake violations and legal theater. She forgot one thing: I build systems designed to survive breaches. And now I was the breach in hers. By the time I turned off the light, one thought burned brighter than the screen I'd stared at all night. Barbara had just declared war. And I don't lose wars. The Saturday sun burned silver across the sidewalk, but my head was nothing but storm clouds. That text she sent last night still rang in my ears. "Drop this before you cause problems for yourself." Yeah, Barbara had finally said the quiet part out loud. She wasn't bluffing anymore. She was cornered. Good. Cornered people make mistakes. I stepped onto my porch, coffee cooling in my grip, eyes scanning a street that suddenly felt like enemy territory. She wanted this to feel big, overwhelming, like some mountain I couldn't climb. I smiled to myself. Game on, I muttered, setting my mug down and grabbing the first envelope from my growing stack of notes. My first stop was 2 doors down Mrs. Henderson's place. She opened the door in a robe patterned with faded roses, gray hair haloed like soft smoke. The second I said Barbara's name, her eyes darted over her shoulder. "You too," she whispered. That told me everything before tea even hit the table. Her story poured out. She left for Florida to visit her daughter for 3 weeks. Came back to dishes in the sink, a blanket on the couch that wasn't hers. When she confronted Barbara, the answer was a smug smile and standard security check. Standard? That sounded more like burglary wrapped in etiquette. And guess what? Barbara billed her $100 for the service. Once the floodgate opened, it didn't close. A neighbor across the street said strangers stayed in his house, too. He came home to half his liquor cabinet gone and a sticky note on his fridge. "Thanks for the hospitality." Another woman found her kitchen rearranged and got slapped with a $200 invoice labeled emergency occupancy. It was the same story, different victims. I didn't need poetic clues. Every fact was screaming. Barbara wasn't safeguarding homes. She was pimping them out like weekend rentals and cashing the checks. No consent, no oversight, just her and a keyring full of power. By nightfall, my dining table wasn't a table anymore. It was a war map. Names, dates, receipts all laid out like ammo. Every piece of paper screamed the same thing: Barbara was running a scam under everyone's nose. The printer spat out pages like bullets as I dug deeper, my hands flying over the keyboard. I cracked open the HOA, bylaws. Again, my eyes hungry for one phrase that might justify her stunt. Nothing, no clause, no exception, no fine print gave her the right to enter private homes or disable security systems. She built this whole empire on smoke and fear. I called Secure Home Solutions to double-check. "Does the HOA have any master override authority?" I asked. The tech on the line laughed so hard I could hear his chair squeak. "Not unless you hand them the codes yourself or a court orders it. Ever." That answer hit me like a hammer. She'd lied to every single person in this neighborhood. She had no legal right. Every time she used that key, every time she killed an alarm, it was trespassing. My pulse drummed against my ribs. This wasn't an HOA squabble anymore. It was criminal, and I was holding the matchbook to light her whole operation up. Midnight came, but I wasn't tired. I was wired. Chloe's texts, bank transfers, Barbara's threat voicemail, Mrs. Henderson's tea-stained confession. They all stacked like bricks on my screen. I grouped them, tagged them, built a timeline sharp enough to cut glass. My laptop glowed like a furnace in the dark as I dropped audio files into a folder labeled Exhibits. Every ping of a saved file was like a round chambered in a gun. My phone buzzed, slicing through the quiet. Unknown number. I answered. Her voice oozed through like poison. "Grant, stop this now," she whispered. "You think you're winning, but you're about to burn down more than you know." Then click. Line dead. My stomach tightened like a fist. I stared at that dark screen for a full minute, jaw-locked, rage simmering with something sharper resolve. She was scared, and that gave me an edge. I saved the voicemail and labeled it Exhibit 12. No dramatic speeches, no moral debates, just action. I typed a formal demand for full disclosure of HOA. Financial records for the last 2 years, citing state law that required compliance within 10 business days. I CC'd the entire board, attaching a digest of my findings enough to make them sweat without giving them the full playbook. When I hit send, it felt like pulling a trigger. The next morning, the sky was bruised purple, and I was back in the truck with envelopes fat enough to choke a shredder. Each board member got a copy, names, dates, screenshots, the whole ugly truth. Derek, the vice president, opened his door in a faded Broncos t-shirt, blinking like he'd just walked into a crime scene. "Morning," I said, evenly handing him the packet. "This is something you need to see." He flipped the first page and his brow knotted like barbed wire. "Grant, what is this proof?" I said. "Barbara's not enforcing rules. She's breaking them and making bank while she's at it." By the time I hit the treasurer's mailbox, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Derek. "We need an emergency meeting. Barbara's blowing up my phone." Good. That meant my missile hit the target. I gripped the steering wheel, feeling the road hum under the tires as I headed home. One thought pounding in rhythm with the engine. She wanted control. She was about to lose everything. Because I wasn't just coming for Barbara's chair, I was coming for the rotten system she built around it. And when the dust settled, there wouldn't be a throne left for her to crawl back to. As I killed the engine and stepped into the quiet of my house, my phone buzzed one last time. 5 words burned across the screen. "You should have stayed silent." I looked up, scanning the tree line beyond my porch. For a split second I swore I saw movement, a shadow peeling away from the dark. My gut nodded. Barbara wasn't playing HOA anymore. She was going full war. And I was ready. The HOA. Clubhouse looked like a courtroom wearing cheap disguise. Bright fluorescent lights hummed overhead, bouncing off the polished tile floor, making every face look a little too pale and nervous. Rows of folding chairs lined up like soldiers, waiting for orders, filled with neighbors, leaning forward, hungry for drama. This wasn't a regular meeting. The air smelled of fear and burnt coffee. Tonight was judgment night, and Barbara knew it. I could feel my pulse in my throat as I gripped the folder in my lap. Photographs, statements, and enough evidence to bury a reputation that had walked around here like royalty. Barbara strutted in 5 minutes late, the kind of entrance that says, "This is still my stage." Her blazer looked expensive at first glance, but stiff as armor, and the way her jaw clenched told a story her lips never would. Behind her walked a man in a wrinkled gray suit, who looked like he'd lost a fight with both fashion and honesty. Barbara announced him as her legal counsel voice, sugar-coated with superiority, but anyone with eyes could tell this guy wasn't courtroom material. He looked more like someone who fixed garage doors than argued cases. People exchanged whispers, and I swear even the fluorescent lights buzzed louder with disbelief. Barbara didn't waste a second. She launched into her performance, words like community trust, shared values, and safeguarding property spilling out as if she believed them. Her voice was honey, but her eyes were razor blades. She painted herself as the guardian angel of Pine Ridge, spinning a tale where villains like me threatened to tear apart her perfect order. I let her ramble. The more she talked, the more rope she gave herself. When she finally paused for air, the chair nodded toward me. I stood slow, calm, and carried my evidence like a loaded weapon. I spread the documents on the table, photos, bank receipts, text screenshots, lined up like dominoes ready to fall. My voice stayed even, cutting through the murmurs like a knife. "Who authorized emergency access to private homes without owner consent?" I asked. Dead silence. That silence screamed louder than any argument. Barbara's jaw twitched, and her grip on the table whitened. Before she could spit out a lie, a chair scraped against the floor. Chloe rose from the back, cheeks flushed, voice trembling, but loud enough to shatter the hush. "Barbara charged me $300 a week to stay in Grant's house," she said. The words hit like a grenade. The room froze, every head snapping like a storm of dominoes. Gasps ricocheted off the walls, whispers catching fire in the corners. Barbara hissed like a snake struck by its own venom. "You little liar," she spat, but Chloe didn't flinch. Tears rimmed her eyes, but her chin stayed high. I slid a paper across the table like a winning card. 2 months of bank transfers, I said, voice flat as stone. All to Barbara's personal account. A ripple tore through the crowd. Shock, anger, disbelief, blending into something electric. Derek, the HOA. Vice President spoke with a voice that sounded like it belonged to someone else. "Barbara, this doesn't look good." That was the trigger. Barbara detonated. Her words exploded shrapnel made of self-pity and rage. She screamed about sacrifices, about how no one appreciated the hours she spent holding this place together. Her fist slammed the table so hard a water pitcher jumped and toppled, spreading across the polished wood, like blood in a crime scene. Neighbors flinched as her voice cracked into something raw, almost feral. But anger wasn't strength tonight, it was desperation. And desperation stinks. I let the silence after her tantrum swallow the room, before stepping in with the calm of a hangman tightening the rope. "If you're done," I said softly, turning my gaze to her, so-called lawyer, "state your bar number for the record." His mouth opened-closed, then opened again like a fish on a dock. The truth crawled out in a voice that made the back row lean forward. "I'm not a lawyer," he muttered. "I'm her brother-in-law." The sound that followed was half gasp, half laughter, sharp as shattered glass. People exchanged looks that said, "Is this real life?" Barbara's face went scarlet, veins standing out like cracks in porcelain. She tried to speak, but words tripped over fury and landed in silence. The Queen's crown had cracked, and everyone could see the pieces hit the floor. Derek's gavel slammed down with a crack that echoed like gunfire. Enough, he barked, voice slicing through the chaos. His eyes swept the board like a judge ready to deliver the verdict. "We vote now. Motion to suspend Barbara effective immediately." One by one, hands lifted. Lisa's trembled like a leaf, but it rose. The treasurer followed, jaw locked in stone. Derek raised his last. 3-1, he said. Motion passed. It was over in less than 30 seconds, but the sound of it stretched like eternity. Barbara stood there, hollow-eyed, clutching her folder, as if it could stop her world from collapsing. She spun on her heel, knocking over a chair that clattered across the tile like a gun dropped in panic. Her brother-in-law scrambled after her, tripping over his own dignity. At the door, she paused long enough to spit venom into the air. "This isn't over, not by a long shot." The door slammed behind her with the force of a shotgun blast. The blinds rattled, and for a moment all you could hear was the nervous shuffle of feet and the whisper of fear crawling up the walls. Because everyone knew what I knew, Barbara didn't take defeat. She took revenge. I gathered my evidence, sliding each page back into the folder with surgical precision. My hands were steady, but the heat in my chest said this was no victory lap. Outside, the night waited like an ambush, black, still too quiet for comfort. The air bit sharp as a blade when I stepped into it, my boots crunching gravel that echoed too loud in the dark. I opened my truck door, the metal cold under my fingers, and dropped the folder on the seat. The engine roared to life, headlights cutting twin spears through the shadows. For the first time all night, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Then my phone buzzed. A text glared on the screen, glowing like a fuse sparking in the dark. 5 words. No name. Just, "You should have stayed silent." My pulse kicked hard, a cold knot twisting in my gut. I looked up, scanning the parking lot, empty except for the clubhouse door swinging slowly on its hinges like something out of a nightmare. And then movement. A shadow peeled from the darkness, long and thin, stretching across the pavement, like the reach of something that didn't plan on letting me walk away. I shifted into drive eyes, locked on that shadow, the text burning in my mind like a brand. Barbara was done playing by rules, and I was done waiting for her next move. A furious pounding shook my door, each blow like a war drum announcing trouble. Not a polite knock. This was the kind of pounding that screamed power play. I froze for half a second, then crossed the living room, heart pounding in sync with the sound. Through the side glass, flashing red and blue streaked across my walls, slicing the calm into chaos. When I opened the door, 2 uniformed officers stood, firm hands hovering near their belts. And behind them was Barbara, chin high, smile stretched into something that almost looked like victory. "Mr. Grant." The taller officer's tone was clipped professional, but it carried weight. "We need to talk." Barbara slithered forward, tilting her head like a saint in a courtroom painting. "Thank you, officers," she purred, before letting her voice crack perfectly on cue. "He's harassing me, spreading lies, threatening my life." Each word slid like oil over glass, practiced, polished. Neighbors stood at the edge of my lawn phones, out recording every flicker of drama. Perfect for Barbara. She wasn't just fighting me. She was staging a show for the entire street. "Step inside, sir," the other officer said evenly. I didn't argue. "Sure," I replied, stepping back as they entered. Barbara floated in behind them like royalty on parade, scanning my living room, with that smug smirk, probably imagining where her victory portrait would hang. Then out of nowhere, she snapped, "Where's the weapon?" Both officers stiffened instantly. My brows shot up. "Weapon?" I asked. "The gun he threatened me with?" she hissed, her tone cracked, brittle. That got the taller cop's attention, but not in the way she hoped. I didn't bother debating. Words were her weapons, not mine. Instead, I walked to the dining table where a thick binder sat like a coiled snake waiting to strike. "Before anyone buys this fantasy," I said, voice slow and sharp, "you might want to look at this." The cops approached, boots thudding against my hardwood floor. I opened the binder, revealing photos, violation notices, screenshots, text logs, weeks of work compressed into a visual sledgehammer. Every letter, every scam, every time she broke the law, I said. Barbara let out a laugh that was half shriek, half desperation. "This is fabricated," she barked. "He's obsessed with me, dangerously obsessed." "Funny," I muttered, sliding my phone across the table, "because your voice doesn't sound very scared." One tap, and the audio spilled into the room. "Drop this nonsense while you still can." Her tone on that recording was pure acid dripping through the air. The taller officer's jaw clenched. The shorter one jotted notes without looking up. Barbara froze for half a second. Barely a flicker, but I saw it. Her mask slipped, and for the first time she looked like what she really was, cornered prey. Then came the wild card, Chloe. She hovered near the threshold like a ghost tethered by guilt. "Chloe," I said quietly, locking eyes with her. She flinched, looked at Barbara, then back at me. "Tell them," I pressed, voice soft but firm. Her fingers twisted the hem of her sweater as her throat bobbed, for a long, suffocating beat silence. Then crack. "Barbara told me to lie," she whispered. "Said Grant scared me. She paid my rent with his house." Her words dropped like a guillotine. The officers turned in unison. Barbara's face went nuclear. "You lying little," Barbara lunged, but the taller cop intercepted her, mid-swing gripping her wrist with iron calm. "That's enough," he ordered, voice like steel bars slamming shut. Barbara thrashed anyway, screaming about loyalty and betrayal. My pulse roared in my ears as relief bled into the edges of my bones. Weeks of hell condensed into this moment, a truth bomb detonating in the middle of her empire. But she wasn't done clawing for air. "You fools," she shrieked, grabbing for the binder. Pages tore free, flapping like wounded birds across the table. "He's framing me," she screeched, veins rising like ropes in her neck. "I built this community. I saved it from trash like him." Her voice cracked under the weight of rage and hysteria. The shorter officer pinned the last page under his palm, stone-faced. The taller one spoke with surgical precision, twisting her arm behind her back as the cold click of metal punctuated her meltdown. "Barbara Sanderson, you're under arrest for fraud, trespassing, and filing a false police report." The words hit harder than any gavel. Barbara froze for a fraction of a heartbeat, then detonated into screams. "You can't do this to me," she wailed, fighting like a wildcat in a trap. "I'm the victim." But the cuffs told a different story. The officers marched her toward the open door as neighbors' phones lit up like fireworks. Gasps, whispers, and the hum of recording apps filled the night air. Every flash captured the end of her empire. She kept shouting names, threats, promises of vengeance until the cruiser swallowed her and slammed its door like a period at the end of chaos. Red and blue lights pulsed down the street, dragging her into a darkness she couldn't bend. The taller officer turned back to me, his expression softer now, almost human behind the badge. "You handled this smart," he said, low enough that only I could hear. "Could have gone bad fast." I nodded, jaw tight, words knotted in my throat. "Appreciate that I managed?" He tapped his notebook shut. "We'll need your full statement tomorrow. Expect a call." Then they were gone, engines humming into the distance, leaving tire whispers on the asphalt. I stood there for a long breath, staring at the empty street, every muscle trembling like a string pulled too tight. Inside my house exhaled with me. The binder lay shredded across the table, but it didn't matter. The truth was out, and the queen had fallen. Still unease crawled under my skin. People like Barbara don't vanish, they hibernate plotting in the dark. I glanced at the shattered order around me, then at the silent glow of the security panel on the wall. For the first time in weeks, it felt like my house again. But as the last echo of sirens faded into the night, a thought carved itself deep in my mind. This isn't over. Not yet. 3 weeks after Barbara's arrest, the neighborhood felt like it had been scrubbed clean. No red-stamped letters on doors. No whispers curling through hedges. Just a calm so thick you could almost taste it. But peace wasn't the only thing spreading. Barbara's downfall had turned viral. The police report read like a crime thriller: 14 homes breached without consent, over $23,000, funneled into her personal accounts, and a paper trail that stretched back 2 years. When the story broke, it didn't just hit local news. It blew up online like a fireworks show nobody saw coming. There it was, trending in a Reddit thread called "When HOA.s Go Rogue." A screenshot of Barbara's mugshot sat under the caption, "Neighborhood Queen Dethroned." The comments were savage. My favorite read, "She turned HOA into Airbnb minus the consent." Someone even photoshopped a tiny crown on her head with "vacancy available" flashing across the top. Twitter caught it next. Hashtags like "Bye Bye Barbara" and HOA. Hell started climbing. Justice had become a meme, and honestly, watching her empire crumble in high definition was the sweetest coffee I'd ever sipped. Court day came fast, and I made sure to be there. Barbara walked up those courthouse steps in a navy suit that looked like it had fought in a war and lost. Her hair was limp, her makeup a map of sleepless nights. Cameras swarmed microphones, lunging like bayonets. And through it all, she tried to smile. That fake brittle grin cracked the second a reporter asked, "Barbara, did you really rent out your neighbors' homes?" The twitch in her jaw said it all. Inside the courtroom, the mask shattered completely. She started strong chin high, spitting words like slander and witch hunt. But the judge wasn't buying tickets to her drama. When he read the charges fraud, criminal trespass, and falsifying police reports, her voice shook for the first time. "I was protecting this community." She cried, tears smearing mascara, like war paint melting in the rain. The gavel slammed so hard it echoed through the marble. Restitution, full penalties, and jail time. Boom. Just like that, the queen of the cul-de-sac had no throne, no keys, and no kingdom. When deputies cuffed her, the sound hit me like a drum roll. That sharp metallic click wasn't just a sound, it was punctuation. The period at the end of her little dictatorship. Phones lit up like fireworks outside the courthouse, capturing her being marched to the cruiser, screaming about loyalty and betrayal. I stood in the crowd, not gloating, just breathing. Deep, steady, like a man stepping out of a storm cellar after a tornado has ripped through. For a second, I thought she might look at me, spit out one last threat. She didn't. She just kept yelling into a void no one cared to fill. The HOA. Didn't waste time fumbling through the rubble. Emergency elections went down within days. The new board started swinging axes fast. New locks shredded Barbara's exclusive access rule. Rewrote bylaws so tight you could bounce a coin off them. Every financial record went public. No more secret accounts fattened by fear. They even added one rule in bold letters that made everyone clap: no master keys. No exceptions. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. The weapon Barbara used to control everyone dead and buried. This street had learned its lesson the hard way. Neighbors came out of hiding with stories that curled my stomach. One guy admitted he paid Barbara cash to avoid violations that never existed. Another confessed she broke into her garden and billed her for a premium redesign. Someone else found a tracking device under his car, probably Barbara's way of catching late-night parking offenses. Each confession was like a shovel digging deeper into her grave. This wasn't about community care, it was organized greed, wrapped in pastel newsletters and fake smiles. And for 2 years, nobody fought back because fear is a hell of a silencer. Me, I finally had quiet again, real quiet. No pounding knocks, no fake fines shoved under my door, just mornings on the porch with a mug of coffee steaming against the chill lake, rippling like glass beyond the pines. I fixed what she broke, patched the doorframe, rearmed the security system, even planted new flowers by the steps. Funny how simple things feel like a luxury when you've spent months at war in your own home. For the first time since this nightmare started, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. One night while cleaning a cabinet, I found something that stopped me cold: Barbara's master key. I'd picked it up from the grass the day after her arrest and forgotten it in a jar. I held it under the lamp, its teeth catching the light like a predator's grin. This tiny piece of metal had been her crown, her weapon, her gospel, and now just a dead relic in my palm. I screwed the lid tight on that mason jar and slid it beside my copy of the HOA bylaws. Let it sit there forever, a warning in glass. Power borrowed is power that burns you. Then the internet delivered the encore Barbara never wanted. A neighbor uploaded a slow-motion video of her arrest set to dramatic music. It hit TikTok first, then everywhere else. Captions screamed HOA, Queen dethroned, caught in 4K. Someone turned her meltdown into a dance meme. Another photoshopped her mugshot onto the poster for Orange is the New Black. My favorite, a photo of the master key wearing a crown with the words, "Long live the Queen." Oh wait. I laughed so hard I spilled coffee across my counter. For once karma wasn't silent, it was trending. Sometimes I think back to that first day unlocking my own door and feeling like an intruder. Barbara tried to break more than rules. She tried to break peace. And she failed. Victory didn't feel like a speech or a parade. It sounded like my porch swing creaking again. It smelled like garlic from my own kitchen this time, because I was cooking in it, not some stranger. And it looked like a lock clicking shut mine, not hers. That's what winning really is, taking back what was yours all along. The neighborhood changed too. You could feel it. Kids riding bikes without someone snapping pictures for violations. People waving instead of glaring over hedges. Barbecues on weekends instead of secret board meetings plotting new fines. Even the air felt lighter, like the whole street exhaled at once. We didn't just fix bylaws, we fixed the silence. Fear doesn't live here anymore. Last night, as the moon spilled silver across the lake, I sat on my porch and stared at that mason jar on the shelf. Just glass and metal, nothing more. But to me, it's a monument, proof that crowns crack keys, rust, and tyrants fall. Barbara thought she ruled this street. Now her kingdom's a jail cell. You know, sitting here now looking out at that lake with the wind, cutting little ripples across it, I can't help but laugh at how insane this all got. A few months back, I was just trying to live quiet, keep my head down, and somehow I ended up in a full-blown war with a woman who thought a title gave her the keys to everyone's life. And if there's one thing I learned from this mess, it's this: never underestimate how far control freaks will go when they think nobody's watching. Paperwork, power trips, fake smiles, they're weapons, and they'll use them. But the flip side, receipts, cameras, and a spine, those win wars. Anyway, I'm curious. If this had happened to you, would you have gone nuclear like I did, or just packed up and moved? Share your thoughts down below because I really want to hear your take. And hey, if you liked hanging out in my chaos for a bit, hit that like button, subscribe for more HOA, nightmares. And yeah, if you feel like buying me a coffee for surviving this circus, that little thanks button is sitting right below the video. No pressure, but it helps keep QA stories rolling. All right, I'm out of here. Catch you in the next one. And hopefully it won't involve cops on my porch at midnight.
That's it for now from QA Stories. Make sure you're subscribed and the bell's on. The next story might just top this one.